All four of us, all three of us, okay, four including you, and and what we were saying. So the question is, uh, what is going to happen in the end times, and also what is happening now, what should be happening now. We have we know that lost in tribes amongst Western nations. That is where they are to be found on the whole. They're a majority or significant elements amongst the Western nations, and that the English-speaking peoples represent the tribes of Joseph. Doesn't mean that they all belong to the tribes of Joseph, Ephraim, Manasseh, but Ephraim and Manasseh have a dominating influence on them, and through those countries they give expression to the tribe, to who they are, and that they have a different role to play in the end times. That first indications are, first they will return. First they will be closer to Judah, as we see. We also see in the world today, those who support, to the degree that the Gentile nations support the state of Israel, they are from those nations. Especially America. Before then it was Britain. At least at the beginning it was Britain. After that it was the USA supporting Israel, helping Israel. It identifies with Israel. Golda Meir, she was Prime Minister of Israel some time ago. About 1970s, early 1970s, and before then. And she also, before then, she had other posts, foreign minister. She was an important person. She once had an audience with Kennedy. President Kennedy was then president of the USA. And he assured her that the USA is supporting Israel. He said that he told her that the USA is a feels as a special obligation to the USA. Different from that towards other countries. So she asked them to what could it be compared. So he said it could be compared to the relationship between the USA and Britain. That just as the USA has a special relationship towards Britain because a good portion of its early citizens and came from Britain, and they share a common culture, a common language, common values, and there's a sentimental attachment, mutual identification. He didn't go into these details. I'm just explaining the significance of what he said, and so too they feel the same way towards Israel, even though the mutuality is not so strong, at least superficially. That's what he said that was important. Also had friends. A friend of mine, his father was a rabbi. His father was a rabbi, and he worked in AIPAC. AIPAC is a very important organization. It's considered a pressure group in U.S. politics. It supports the State of Israel and encourages American dignitaries and American politicians to also support the State of Israel. And having the support from AIPAC is very important. Is important both on the local communal level and the national level. It's important for Americans. I'm sure you've all heard of AIPAC. Anyway, is connected with AIPAC and had an audience with his son. He went with one of his sons to this audience to meet President Reagan. Yeah, and President Reagan spoke well of him, spoke well to him, and he said that we too he's from Ireland. Actually, the father of President Reagan was a professional storyteller. He came from Ireland. His father had been a professional storyteller, which was something they had in Ireland. Also in Ireland, they always had people who had oral traditions weren't written down. They passed on from father to son, and a lot of information. Some of this information has since been written down. It's been found to pan out. It's been found to correspond with actual facts. Like they say that, for instance, that a certain person, a princess is buried at a certain place, and they go and bury there and dig up that place, and they find it. They said there was once a road between one area and another, and they dig back and they find in the Middle Ages there really was a road in that area. In other words, these traditions are often reliable. Also, concerning me personally, they say they had traditions, genealogical traditions, father to the son. This is a genealogy of the father going right back to certain people. And in a few cases, they've checked this out and they found that it's correct, the DNA proofs confirming it, which also is how we relate back. What happened? My son took a DNA test, and he found, according to DNA, he belonged to this family. He was connected with this family of Neil, who were very important in the history of Ireland. The early kings of Ireland was Neil, and also the lords of local potentates all over Ireland were descended from him, and they had a concentration in the north of Ireland and the northwest of Ireland, both in the Catholic and the and the Protestant areas, and also had outlayers in northern Scotland, but they had a concentration in Northern Ireland. And the DNA findings, they found a certain DNA marker that was pertained to them, and it corresponded with the genealogical traditions. Actually, it's a couple of million people all over the world. It's quite a large group. So this got me interested in it. Then I checked out on the family history, asked different questions, and we found out that there was a great-grandfather who didn't know where he came from Wales, and apparently that must have been an Irish traveller or some who knows what, but that was that filled in the space, probably. Anyway, it's interesting. Why did I get onto because President Reagan his father was one of these people who would pass on these traditions, tell these tales. And President Reagan said the hill of Torah, the hill of Torah, sacred hill of Torah, and he said that Torah is related to the word Torah, and his ancestors were Israelites. And so he say, in other words, he believed that he is descended from Israel. So that was interesting. And also, I did help he was very pro-Israel, President Reagan. He also helped save the Jews from being wiped out in Africa. He got them into Sudan, and from Sudan he helped the Israelis fly them into Israel, otherwise in danger of being exterminated or being in a very difficult situation. And President Reagan was active in that, and he did it. Also, he helped get the Jews out of Russia. Before then, there was years of struggles and problems, and he enabled the Jews were allowed to leave Russia without being interfered with. And a good portion of them came to Israel, and that also helped the state of Israel out of a difficult situation. An input of more people demographically, it strengthened us. Also, a lot of the Russians were skilled, were qualified engineers, qualified professors, all kinds of people. Also, as just ordinary workers to help build up the state of Israel. So President Reagan played a large role in that. He was a good friend of ours. So that's what we have. So that is interesting. Just another historical point of interest, because a lot of negative things about the Irish. Okay, first of all, the Irish are the worst anti-Semites, not the worst anti-Semites. They are probably the worst anti-Semites amongst the Israelite nations. They are more anti-Israel, at least in their attitude towards the state of Israel, than any other group, and it borders on anti-Semitism. Also in the Second World War, even though a lot of them came to England to serve, and they served in the armed forces, and they worked in the factories, and they helped the Allies a lot, the attitude was lacking, and they did not accept Jews, even though they accepted Jewish refugees, even though they accepted Catholics, or accepted Christians from other places, refugees, even Nazis after the Second World War they accepted. The Jews they did not accept. And they were, and now they say they've changed them. They were Catholic. Now they're not Catholic, but they're still the same. Now they're progressive. When they were Catholic, they were against the Jews because that was an attitude of certain Catholic right-wing groups. It was consistent with the Catholic line of thought, or one of them. Now they're no longer Catholic, at least in their beliefs, but they're progressive. So as being progressive, they take the progressive even more against the state of Israel than they were beforehand. So whatever the excuse is, whatever the changes are made, that basic aspect of their character, their problem that they have, remains. And so there's a lot of negativity, and we've also written articles about it. We have on Quora, We wrote an article condemning the Irish with anti-Semitism. That was very well widely read. That article, tens of thousands of people, maybe 100,000. A large number of people read the article. A lot of them approved it, and it was one of the most successful articles that we've ever written. And we go into that in detail, so we're not blind to that. But even though it's not black and white. There were Irish people who were very important in the struggle against the Nazis, and they helped save the world. There's also Brendan Breccan. Brendan Breccan was Irish origin. His father and his mother, they were Irish nationalists against the British. Very active. They belonged to groups that were forerunners to the IRA, not the same as the IRA, but ideological forerunners to them. And they were very active in that. And Brendan Breccan, as a young man, he was in Ireland with his family, and he was a bit of a troublemaker. So his mother sent him to Australia when he's about 16. They sent him actually to the Christian Brothers establishment. One of his cousins was a priest, was a brother there or something, and they let him read a lot. He was very intelligent from a very young age. So he spent most of his time in the library reading. He's reading all the time. And in Australia, and somehow they made money. All his life he had pension, talent for making money, even as a child. And also in Australia made money. And this is interesting for different reasons. I'll write an article about it. A lot of people never heard of him, don't know who he was. And he was in Australia for 3 years. And then when he came back to Ireland after 3 years, his father had died, his mother had remarried, and all the families had not only he, but also his siblings, his brothers, they had disavowed, they distanced themselves from Irish nationalism. Brendan Breccan became convinced of the value of British civilization, wanted to devote his life to it, to British culture, British civilization, and he also wanted to get ahead in the world. And in England that time you needed a school tie. A school tie was very valuable to get in certain places, to make acquaintances. Say you were a graduate of a certain school, you had a school tie, you had the right to wear a school tie, and it was of use. So he went to the headmaster of a prestigious school in England, told him a story that his parents were in Australia, had been killed in a bushfire, and left him a little bit of money to supplement his education, and he was 19 at the time, and he came to be 16, and he wanted to enroll in the school, and the headmaster didn't really believe him, but he liked him, and he saw he had a brilliant mind, so he accepted him. So then he was one term, 3 or 4 months he stayed in the school. That was enough to earn him the right to wear the tie and say that he was a graduate of the school. And incidentally, he didn't harm the school, because all his life he supported it, and then he became a governor of it. He financially stabilized it, and until the end of his days, and also left a fund when he died in favor on behalf of the school. Anyway, after the school, he got a job as a tutor, then as a teacher, and then he became involved in publishing and business, and he got on reasonably well. I don't know all the details. This is just a very, very short outline. And he decided to devote himself to politics. Also, another point about him is that he had red hair, very bright red hair, like Winston Churchill. And he made a point of going around meeting all different up-and-coming politicians. One of them he met was Winston Churchill. And then even at a certain stage, he became the personal secretary of Winston Churchill. He moved into his house. And he had a bright red hair, and so did Winston Churchill have bright red hair. And they even looked similar. And Brendan Breccan used to spread the story that he was the illegitimate son of Winston. Yeah. And Churchill's wife didn't like it. And Winston himself said, the story sounds interesting, but I checked the dates and they don't They don't correspond. Anyway, but that's what he was, and he helped Winston Churchill. And when the Second World War broke out, he helped Winston Churchill get elected to as a member of Parliament. He helped him in a lot of ways. When the Second World War broke out, and Winston Churchill was to be part together with Lord Halifax, have a conference with the King when they decided which government would go ahead. The British had attempted were fighting against the Germans, had attempted to invade Norway, and this had ended in failure. And there's a vote of no confidence in the House of Commons, so they decided to elect a new government. And the candidates were, the most favourite candidate was Lord Halifax. The King wanted him, everyone wanted him. The Labour wanted him, Lord Beaverbrook said of him, the King wanted him, he wanted himself. The Labour wanted him, the Liberals wanted him, the Conservatives wanted him, and in the end they chose Churchill. Why did they chose Churchill? Because Churchill came to the meeting and didn't say anything. When he was asked who should be the leader, he didn't say anything. And Brendan Breccan had sensed that this was what would be the case, and made Churchill promise not to say anything, not to say who was in favour of leading the government, to keep quiet no matter what. And that's what he did, and they understood by silence that he would not be prepared to work with anyone unless he himself headed the government. And Halifax also, since that, Halifax decided that since Churchill had more of the people behind him, that you should let him be the leader of the country. So Churchill became the leader, against all the will of most of the political heads in the country. Churchill became the leader of the government, and that helped Britain win the war, or the Allies win the war. Also, other times, Breccan used his influence. He was a businessman. He had contacts with America, and he helped. He wasn't responsible for arrangement, but he helped the arrangements between America and Britain, for America to help Britain, even before America was part of the war. Also, Brendan Breccan was instrumental in having widely publicised the extermination of the Jews that was going on in Europe. He was responsible for that. He did a lot of things behind the scenes, and he was Irishman. He was an Irishman. He was also he was a bit of an eccentric, but he contributed a lot. So anyway, so where did we get? We got onto that because of what we were saying concerning the President Reagan, President Kennedy, and other American presidents said things in favour of the Jews. I have a whole book of it. Someone wrote a book about it, a big fat book. The Israeli Member of Parliament. It's quite a good book. Maybe I'll bring it in next time to talk about it. Anyway, this is well known. Incidentally, I have this book. This book is written the Bible in Balfour, which shows it talks about how the British, before the Balfour Declaration, of being in favour of a Jewish home in Palestine in 1917, how there was a long history, hundreds of years amongst the British of English of being favourable towards the Jews, relatively speaking, and having a strong minority element, but a very powerful minority of them, generation after generation, who believed in helping the Jews.